Thank you.
Awesome.
All right. Do you want to introduce what we're talking about, Nelson?
Yeah, so the way that so first I want to put kind of like, we're in the dream world, right? And I think, years ago, I talked with Vinay and kind of like presented this idea that there's two types of dreams. The dreams that are dangerous because they capture people when you stay in the world of illusions, and the dreams of like the change makers, the ones that are actually putting a vision of something that they want to create and then manifest it into reality. And I think it's very important to separate both and really focus on like, what are we actually building? What are we actually anchoring in reality? So I want to talk about the real dreams that we can create.
Nice. So I want to start by showing a few seconds of a video from the Ethereum Foundation in 2015. This is kind of way back at the beginning. Let me just...
First, who remembers the World Computer video? Who was there in 2015? I see one hand.
Ethereum is the secure backbone for everything from e-commerce to the Internet of Things, enabling transparent governance for communities and businesses while keeping user communication secure. Mix, the Ethereum IDE, makes it easy to develop, debug, and deploy your applications, while building UIs is done using your existing web development skills. Ethereum is the secure backbone for everything from e-commerce to the Internet of Things, enabling transparent governance for communities and businesses.
Now, what I want to point out here is how physical this vision is, right? This is physical stuff. Power stations, planes, e-commerce shopping carts, there are houses, there's all kinds of physical stuff in there. And the Ethereum vision at that point was that Ethereum was going to be infrastructure that ran in the real world, right? It was going to go directly into e-commerce, it was going to go directly into real estate, it was going to go directly into financial markets. It was going to change how people owned things. And 2015, 2016, 2017, there was a whole bunch of attempts to get institutions that had things and that had institutional power to go out there and figure out how to get their things onto the blockchain. There was a huge sea of prototyping done with banks. There were lots of big corporations. Germany had a whole industrial network that was interested in Ethereum. And what happened was that those projects never came to market. And a lot of the reason that that happened is that we thought they would come to market. We didn't realize that the way that big corporations typically do stuff with technologies, they do a bit of prototyping, they get a bit of a language for it, and then they ignore it for 10 years until somebody else pays the development costs. So there was an enthusiasm in the space where we expected adoption because of all these prototype projects that were done, and then no adoption happened. And where Ethereum was left was all dressed up with nowhere to go. Right? We had this world-class infrastructure for trading things, but we had no things. And what happened was that people started to make up things to sell. They made imaginary property, and they sold the imaginary property as if the imaginary property was real property. And there have been several rounds of this. So the first round of imaginary property that really got big was the ICO tokens, 2018. They were a bit like equity. They probably should have been securities. They probably should have been illegal, and 90 or 95% of them turned out to have delivered nothing and were probably frauds. And there was billions of dollars of losses to the public in that process, and a handful of very interesting, very successful projects got funded. But that whole time period was largely imaginary products for imaginary companies being sold on the chain. Then there was a bit of a gap, and then DeFi opened up, right? DeFi opened up. What was DeFi? Overall, it was a massively loss-making industry. Money was not being produced, money was being pulled out of some pockets and concentrated in other pockets, because, you know, as somebody said to me, which I had not heard before, weirdly enough, if you don't know where the yield is coming from, you are the yield, right? And in 2018, lots of people, you know, bought their tokens. Then we got the kind of DeFi summer. Lots of people invested those tokens in weird-looking protocols, and somebody paid them money out of something, and it was mostly Ponzi schemes. And overall, it was just gambling. The NFTs come around, right? The NFTs theoretically should have been intellectual property licenses for commercially exploitable things. there were no commercially exploitable licenses because they didn't get the lawyers involved early enough. And as a result, things like Bored Apes didn't come with the right to use the Bored Ape in a movie or a video game in a way that was clear enough that you could sell them to Disney. As a result, the Bored Apes were a largely notional concept. So what we did at Materium was we spent 6 years of the lives of a group of really, really smart people, mostly substantially older. I mean, I'm 52, most of the team is at least 40. And we spent that time figuring out how to get real things onto the blockchain in a legally compelling way. And we succeeded. Nelson, could you pop up the tab with the Swarm agreement?
Yeah, for sure.
The Swarm partnership? That's the one. So, does anybody know Joel Dietz? Does anybody remember Joel Dietz, Swarm? He was around a long time ago. He was very ambitious. So, Swarm fell into the hands of some very, very diligent and sensible Germans, led by a guy called Philip Piper, and they got licensed in Germany as a financial institution which has the right to issue digital securities. They also have an exchange, which is a fork of Uniswap that's been modified to do KYC, AML, CTF. They can now take an asset and they can legally issue it on Ethereum main chain. They can take real estate and they can carve it up into 1 million tokens and sell the tokens. They can take economic participation rights from a protocol, package it up as securities, issue all the necessary paperwork, and then issue a licensed security in the EU on Ethereum main chain in Germany. Right? This is not the Cayman Islands. This is not, a special economic zone in some hellhole. Berlin, right? Now, if we had had that in 2015, do you think there ever would have been an ICO bubble? No, there would have been onto regulated tokenized securities, and there would have been prospectuses, and there would have been legal consequences if people ripped each other off. We would have been doing tokenized real estate. What I say to people when I'm talking to potential investors and stuff like that is, hey, why is there no global electronic exchange for the world's largest asset class? $3 trillion of real estate are transacted every year. $300 trillion of real estate exists. Nobody is doing electronic exchange of these things at a technological level. It just doesn't exist. Why is that? And there are some answers. You need a blockchain. It helps if you've got AI. So what I want to suggest is we've basically gone through 6 or 8 years of claw sharpening, right? We've been like a little kitten clawing on the curtains to get good, and we're now pretty good. But until we get the real world assets into the system, we cannot start changing people's lives, because you can't buy food and you can't rent a place to live or buy a place to live using your magic internet money. And this deal, it's the first of many. This is what changes that. Because now you can actually buy and sell real estate. Could you put up the real estate thing? The first one, the asset passport. Now you can buy and sell real estate in legally compelling ways on chain, and then you can walk it over to Swarm and you can securitize that real estate. Next tab over. The one that says, yeah, that guy, right? That's a patch of land. If you go to materium.com/land, you can see that. It's an NFT you can buy on OpenSea. They want $2 million. And when you buy the NFT, you become the legal owner of an interest in the land. And if you show it to a lawyer, the lawyer will be like, yes, you're actually buying something. And this is all tied to changes in English law and arbitration agreements, the UK Jurisdiction Task Force we operated with. Could you pull that tab up for a second? So what I want to basically say is this. This work should have been located at the Ethereum Foundation. It should have been a public good. The Ethereum Foundation did not understand that it was possible or that it was necessary or how expensive and difficult it would be. As a result, I wound up funding it myself. We are issuing a token in the very near future on Swarm, fully regulated. That's how we're going to pay for the next phase of development. Would I rather this had been a foundation project? Absolutely. But here we are. Welcome to free enterprise. What this gets us is the ability to do real estate on chain, and there are compelling reasons for doing real estate on chain. Nelson, do you want to talk about those compelling reasons and what you want to do with real estate on chain?
Yeah, so basically I've been working on a lot of the idea of crypto spaces, but also building smart villages, right? Okay, how can we get I was living in a yoga retreat for 6 months, and then during the lockdown, and then I was thinking, why couldn't we get like 20 tiny houses in the middle of nature, Starlink satellites, super high-tech everything, and then we just live together? And then it made me think, okay, how can we use blockchain to enable that in terms of like the economical, the governance, and even you could think of sort of the traceability in terms of like managing the land, and, make sure that, the impact and all the carbon credits and everything is accounted properly. But then turns out that when you start to want to tokenize real estate and own stuff together on chain, it starts to become really, really hard, almost impossible. Like you have no actual certainty in most of those platforms, those deals. Like how can you know that you actually own this house? Or how can you know that with the token you own 20% of the house? Like what does it mean to own 20% of the house? But also how can we pull money together in a way that you're not gonna get rugged? Like there is a actual proper recourse, because those investments are not 10,000, 100,000. Sometimes it's in the million, right? We're talking about buying, I don't know, 50 hectares of land and then building 20 houses. Like how can you do that? Or even if you think about like, okay, I live in Prague or I live in Barcelona, I want to create a crypto space with co-working space, a members club, a wine bar, a cafe that we all own together, and that because we invest in it, we all profit from it. But how can we do that and manage it in a way that it's not just controlled by one person, but it's actually owned by a DAO? Right? It's the dream of the DAOs, but actually applied to the real world. And that's where we came up with the concept of liquid co-ownership.
So the DAOs have, in this kind of kitten sharpening claws way, built an enormous infrastructure for doing shared asset ownership. It's just the assets that the DAOs own tend to be kind of dumpster fires. But there's no reason we couldn't take the software of the DAOs, reinstall legals on top of that software, because that's essentially a terms of service contract and maybe some KYC, and then those DAOs own NFTs or ERC20s, which are percentages of ownership or full ownership of hard physical assets. And then you take all the DAO governance and decision-making procedures and protocols and record-keeping and so on, and you literally have DAOs making decisions over physical assets. How are we doing for time? Do we got 10 more minutes? My God. So,
Go for it.
So what that kind of produces is a part where everything up until now has been dress rehearsal, right? Imaginary assets, imaginary money, a whole bunch of trials and tests and, kind of flexing of muscle, building of software. Over the next few years, tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars worth of physical assets could transition onto the chain, and you could address them in exactly the same way that you address things like NFTs for IP. You buy the NFT, and now you own a home in Tokyo. Great. Now we put that into the rental contract, and a third-party agency rents the place out for you and pays you an income stream on chain. That sort of stuff at scale has only really been waiting for the ability to get the real estate securely tied to the NFT. Once you've got the ability to securely tie the real estate to the NFT, we can throw these things through the entire plethora of DeFi operations, and we can build all of the kind of wonderland stuff that we've been talking about.
Mortgages on chain.
Yes. Mortgages on chain, right? And so let's talk a bit about mortgages, right? So right now, the way that we do real estate is debt financed. And I think anybody that has ever been in debt understands that debt sucks. Debt is a horrible way of doing things, and particularly debt is socially corrosive. So if Nelson is going to buy a house, and Nelson, wants to buy a bigger place because Nelson has plans, he may need more money than he can lay hands on for things. Right? May need more money than he can immediately lay hands on to be able to buy that house. Right? So you start talking about borrowing money from friends and relatives to buy the house, but now you owe grandma 30 grand. And, grandma at some point decides she wants a vacation, and how is the economy doing? The flip around, it becomes possible once you can tokenize things like real estate. Legally, when I say tokenize, assume lawyers. I don't just mean pretend to tokenize. I mean actually will stand up in court tokenize. Is that now what you can do is you can split ownership of the home. So you can have a deal with grandma where grandma gets 10% of the house, And you don't owe grandma anything until you sell the house and then she gets her 10% cut, right? You can build mechanisms where you can repurchase your equity from grandma at a fixed rate or a variable rate. You can just figure out how you want it to work. You can put it on chain and you can do it. Now, what that creates is a different social relation. If Nelson owes grandma 30 grand, grandma wants her 30 grand back. If grandma owns 10% of Nelson's house, grandma wants Nelson to make his house as pretty as possible, and she wants to come around and live there sometimes, right? It encourages closeness and it encourages collaboration because people are now co-venturing. They're in the same boat. They've got every incentive to work together. At the level of an individual house, that's interesting. At the level of stuff like the kind of large community projects that Nelson is building, you're talking about hundreds of people involved. 24 families living on site, say 60 or 80 people, their friends and their relatives that help finance it, other people potentially a much wider community. You could wind up with 1,000 or 10,000 people that have some economic interest in that land project. And all of those people are now incentivized to make that project work in exactly the same way that if they're in a debt situation, they're incentivized to get their money out first before somebody else does.
Maybe I can add something to that. It's like also
Pablo in a second.
Okay. Let me add this, and then we're going to go to your question. So the idea with the grandma is that you're already related, right? Grandma loves you. She always does. Well, most of the time. But if we're talking about, like, all of us in the room, right? Like, we don't have the same age. We don't have the same culture. We don't have the same socio-economic background. We don't have the same cultural practices, which, you know, a lot of the especially, you know, the intentional communities, they get together, it doesn't work because simply we don't have the same OS, we don't have the same software. And there's a lot of like glitches in terms of communication. It's like protocols that don't have the right interfaces and trying to communicate. A lot of the places you have a lot of issues if you're just counting on like people being nice to each other. Because being nice and understanding each other means different things for different people and tends to really not work on just goodwill. But now, if instead of like just counting on goodwill, we have clear contracts, clear procedures, clear, you know, responsibilities and liabilities, and then we just co-own stuff together, right? Like I own 2% of your house, I own 5% of your business, you know, then I have interest in coming to your bakery and supporting it because, well, it's also partly my stuff. And what if we all own everything together, and like it doesn't have to be everything like all the people in the group own the same things, but I can just decide to own a little bit of like all the pieces that I like. And then maybe in the fact that it has to be liquid is also, if I want to go, I can go and resell the token somehow. And you know, we get a bunch of people here that are really smart and can market make properly, and I'm sure we can make it work. But the point is like to make it easy for people to come into agreement that are clear in advance, so there is no broken expectation. And then have a sense of like, we're all in this together because we all own this asset together. And if you win, I win. And that's the win-win world that I think we can build together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as they say, good fences make good neighbors. If we build these things properly, we get collaboration without conflict. Pablo, you had a question.
Good fences make good neighbors is why I don't want to build a hippie community. Like, I want you as my neighbors, not in my house. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all this. I wanted to understand a little more the technical UBO level. How does it work? So what do I own when I have the NFT? Is the wallet the ultimate beneficiary owner? Is it a claim on property, a right to use?
So it depends on whether the property is real estate or movable property. Mm-hmm. If it's something like a gold bar, the fact that the owner of the gold bar has accepted your money in exchange for the gold bar is a legal proof of ownership.
Sorry, so the fact that it's claimable
no.
is legal?
If I'm selling a gold bar, mm-hmm. and I say this gold bar is $60,000, if you show me a receipt where you gave me $60,000 in exchange for a gold bar, a court will accept that as being proof that you own the gold bar. Mm-hmm. Right? Contractual documentation, proof of payment, there's an interest, there's consideration. You know, it's easy to demonstrate that a contract was formed, an exchange occurred. the hard part is if the gold bar turns out to be tungsten and managing the liability of all that stuff. So a lot of the work that we've done in these asset passport things is actually about managing the defects in property. So if somebody sells a token for a gold bar and the gold bar turns out to be bogus, there are half a dozen different problems that could be, and each one of those problems has a different owner, and those owners are paid for carrying the risk and making you whole in the event that that problem happens. So what you're buying is a set of insurance or warranty contracts, as well as the bar. And the idea is that your net value is the same, whether the bar is real, fake, missing, or damaged. Doesn't. You get the bar, you get the money.
Okay.
When you deal with real estate, it's a lot more complicated because real estate is owned on registers. So this class of registered property, which is vehicles, real estate, and a few other things, the registered property stays inside of a special purpose vehicle, and the special purpose vehicle owes you a debt, which is the asset. If the special purpose vehicle can't pay the debt, then you hit the warranty system again and you retrieve your value. So it's akin to any economic protocol. If you don't have underwriters for the deals are too risky. So you need the underwriters.
So the trust assumption on real estate would be that the SPV operates, and if that wouldn't work, I would have a legal claim against it.
Not against the SPV, but against third-party underwriters.
Okay.
So, for example, could you scroll down this page a bit to the one that says the title claim, point 2? So the title claim here, this is the thing that guarantees you that there is clean title on this thing. Oh.
Don't get hit by the beam.
Oh, the beam. The beam. So you can see here that this company, Nichols, Christie and Crocker, are the people that are providing the information that there is clean title on this. So they're a UK law firm, which means that this warranty is covered by their legal insurance. If somebody hits them with a $2 million charge and they go bankrupt, it hits their legal insurance. And at that point, what you're buying is a very strong guarantee, right? And that ability to purchase with strong guarantees, you know, if we have another fiasco like we did with NFTs or DeFi on physical assets on chain, we will not see the migration of the global real estate market onto the blockchain, right? It must not be a fiasco. If it is a fiasco, real estate will not move, and we will not get to do $3 trillion a year of real value. And I personally think that would suck, particularly given that I'm probably the leading actor in that space. But if we wind up with fiascos and people don't trust the tokens correspond to real legal value, we cannot build a legitimate real-world asset industry. We can't get into the real world, and we're just going to be stuck on this cycle until everybody runs out of coins. Something else?
Yeah, so basically, because you cannot guarantee the asset, you're guaranteeing the value. Either you get the asset or something will give you an equivalent value.
Exactly.
Like fire insurance.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's very much how the real world works, right? I mean, normally to get that value, you have to litigate. Mm-hmm. So because we, you know, if you have like a real estate surveyor and they tell you this house is fine and you buy the house and the house falls down, you have to generally sue them in a court. Because these are warranties, you don't have to mount a lawsuit. You make a warranty claim, which can be done on chain. They could pay you the warranty. That can be done on chain. If they refuse, it goes to a specialized arbitration court. So we worked for several years with various bits of the UK legal system to get a set of rules for doing disputes over digital assets in the UK. Let me pull up that tab if I could. So the UK digital dispute resolution rules were created by this guy who is the most senior judge in the UK for handling commercial dispute. So anything that isn't criminal law, he's the most senior judge for England and Wales, actually, not for the UK. He has the medieval title, the Master of the Rolls. The rolls were literally leather rolls of goat hide that you wrote all the laws on. And we helped to draft these things. We're quoted in them. We were the first company to use them. When he presented the rules to the public, he was the first speaker, I was the second speaker. So we are tightly integrated into that process. And you know, the mood in London is very pro-blockchain. The guy that just took over as this Lord Mayor of London, Michael Manelli, is extremely technically sophisticated, you know, has a project which is a time-stamping chain, which is not quite a blockchain, but very similar. I can't try to remember the name of that project. The company is called Xian. So the legal enforceability structures that make this stuff work, you know, these rules work in 172 jurisdictions. So if you and I have a contract, you're in Brazil, I'm in China, we can specify that in the event of a dispute, it goes to a UK court, a UK arbitration tribunal. The UK arbitration tribunal specifies that it uses these rules, and as a result, we can make legally binding decisions about the ownership of real estate anywhere in the world, as long as you do the contractual stuff properly. So you're swapping tokens on chain, but there's a chain of legal authority that goes all the way up to that set of rules and, you know, the supreme leadership of UK court system, and then comes back down inside of the nation states to allow you to seize property or bank accounts all over the world. This stuff is fully enforceable in the real world against real assets. And it's also, this Clause 11 thing, this is absolute dynamite. So under this, the person that is resolving the arbitration, right, the person that runs the arbitration tribunal can legally access an escrow contract to move value from one party to the other party without requiring a court order from a nation state. They can do full and final settlement of the dispute on the chain without it ever having to see a judge in a country. We call that concept synthetic jurisdiction. The first one in the world is in the UK. Materium are bringing assets into the synthetic jurisdiction. And what you'll see over the course of the next year is that we will build out an entire dispute resolution mechanism with escrows and on-chain insurance and a whole bunch of other stuff. And that entire system will enable smooth and clean transactions for real estate anywhere in the world, also gold. It is time to get this party started.